The world watched Virginia. Inside the Fluvanna Correctional Center for Women in Troy, Teresa Wilson Lewis sat in her cell. It was September 22, 2010. Worldwide outrage echoed, but still, the countdown had begun. A child waiting for the needle. Not literally, but in many ways. Lewis was 41, yet, with borderline intellectual functioning and an IQ of 72, she was often described as having the mind of a 12-year-old. Her case ignited a fierce debate over capital punishment, louder than the nation had seen in years. International pressure reached a boiling point. The European Union sent an urgent appeal, pleading for clemency. Even Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad joined in, accusing the West of double standards, condemning executions in Iran while ignoring, in his words, the imminent execution of a mentally impaired woman. More than 7,300 clemency requests flooded the governor's office, but Bob McDonnell stood firm, declaring there was no compelling reason to change her fate. Her legal fight was over. The U.S. Supreme Court had refused to hear her final appeal, closing the door on a last-minute stay. Even her legal team had surrendered. Her legal odyssey has ended, attorney James E. Rocap III told reporters. He condemned the decision, mourning a client he called a childlike and loving spirit, someone, he said, who didn't deserve to die. But her actions painted a far darker picture. Nearly 8 years earlier, on a quiet October night in Pittsylvania County, Teresa had knelt in prayer with her husband. Moments later, she climbed into bed beside him. So far, nothing unusual, except for one thing. She had left the back door unlocked on purpose. At 3:15 a.m., two men slipped into the house. Gunshots shattered the silence. Then they slipped back into the night. It was quick, and it was messy. And for Julian and his son, C.J. Lewis, it was fatal. But Teresa didn't rush to help. Nearly 45 minutes passed before 911 was called. When police arrived, they found her rifling through her husband's wallet. Her story of a mystery intruder dressed in black collapsed shortly after. The unlocked door was just the final act in a plan set in motion long before. The two gunmen weren't strangers. They were Matthew Schallenberger, Teresa's lover, and his friend, Rodney Fuller. Their motive? A share of the $250,000 life insurance payout. Teresa had set the night in motion with crushed sedatives in drinks and finished it with an open door. It was her role as mastermind that led her to the chamber. Prison officials noted that Lewis slept only in short, broken stretches. The hours awake were filled with hymns and prayers. While faith had once been a quiet thread in her life, it was on death row that she clung to it fully. Prayer and scripture became her refuge. Those who walked beside her in those years, chaplains, spiritual advisors, visiting pastors, spoke openly of her transformation. They described her as deeply remorseful, repentant, and shaped by years of reflection and faith behind prison walls. Meanwhile, 120 miles away, outside Greensville Correctional Center, where the gurney waited, the night air flickered with candlelight. Activists and supporters gathered through the dark hours, praying for a last-minute reprieve. Some held candles, others clutched signs reading, "Life is sacred, do not kill," and "Don't kill her in my name." Together, they sang hymns and offered prayers. Morning light crept through the steel bars when breakfast arrived. The usual fare: bread, a packet of jelly, a small carton of milk. Teresa barely touched it. She had other things to do. Knowing her time was slipping away, she sat down to write. By hand, she composed 2 final letters, one for each of her children. Her attorney later shared that those letters carried her last simple gift: words of love and goodbye. Visitation rules tightened. With just 12 hours to go, Teresa was granted one final visit, limited to immediate family. At 9 a.m., her adult daughter, Christy Lynn Bean, arrived for those last precious hours. In most U.S. death row cases, Visits are strictly non-contact, with conversations through glass. But that day, Virginia made an exception. They were allowed to hold each other one last time. Under the close watch of prison guards, mother and daughter embraced, talked, and even found moments to laugh, searching for traces of normalcy on a day that was anything but normal. By early afternoon, it was time. Teresa Lewis was shackled and escorted under heavy guard to a waiting VDOC transport. The journey from Fluvanna in Troy to Greensville in Jarrett stretched 120 miles, a tense 2.5-hour drive flanked by armed officers. Once at Greensville, Teresa was identified, formally processed, searched, and placed on death watch, just steps away from the execution chamber. After a quiet hour settling into her death watch cell, Lewis was served her last meal. The kitchen at Greensville prepared the order she'd given the day before: fried chicken breasts, sweet peas with butter, and a cold Dr. Pepper to wash it down. For dessert, either German chocolate cake or apple pie. In the end, the prison prepared both, a small gesture on a day with few left. It's unclear how much she actually ate, but many noted the quiet weight of the moment, her final choice in life reduced to something as small as dessert. After the meal, Teresa was given time to shower and change into clean, prison-issued clothes. A simple denim shirt and pants laid out for her final hours. As night fell on September 23rd, Lewis was allowed a last visit with her attorney, James Rocap, and her spiritual advisor, Reverend Lynn Litchfield, a former prison chaplain who had counseled her for years. They prayed together, sang hymns, and held hands. Surprisingly, Teresa was the one lifting spirits. We thought we were supposed to be helping her, but she was actually helping us, Rocap later said, recalling her calm composure and steady faith. Reverend Litchfield admitted she was nervous walking into that last meeting. What do you even say to someone facing death? But when the chaplain gently asked how she was feeling, Teresa smiled and said, "Can't you see the peace?" adding a line that stayed with Litchfield forever. It's like how a little child feels going to bed, knowing mommy and daddy are in the next room. That's how I feel. Jesus has me. Then came the singing. As Teresa softly sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," the chaplain broke. Teresa lifted her arms toward the ceiling, singing, "I sing because I'm happy. I sing because he set me free." Through the bars, she reached out, cupped the chaplain's face, and wiped away her tears. The woman who had once orchestrated a brutal crime was long gone. What stood before her now was someone transformed. Litchfield was certain. With just 15 minutes left, a final formal check went to the governor's office. No reprieve, no clemency. The execution was cleared to proceed. Official witnesses, including journalists, were quietly led into the viewing rooms. Everyone understood. The end was near. After 10 to 15 steps, Teresa Lewis reached the execution chamber, where 14 corrections officers waited silently. She appeared frightened and tense, her jaw clenched, her body rigid as her eyes fell on the gurney. She looked a little startled when she walked in. It was a fearful expression, one reporter said. Despite the fear, Lewis remained composed enough to walk under her own power. At exactly 9 p.m., bells tolled in the distance, rung by protesters standing vigil outside. Their message was sharp and cutting through the night.
Virginia, you are the murderer tonight.
Inside, everything was in place. IV lines ran to Teresa Lewis's arms, left exposed by the short sleeves of her blue prison uniform. Her eyes were wide with fear as she glanced anxiously around the room. Warden George Hinkle stepped forward and asked for her final words. In a clear but trembling voice, Teresa spoke directly to her stepdaughter, Kathy Clifton, who she believed was watching from behind the one-way glass. "I just want Kathy to know that I love her and I am very sorry," she said. Her last apology, spoken with visible remorse. Kathy Clifton was there. She later told reporters that she heard the apology, appreciated it, but remained unsure if Teresa's soul would find peace. After a brief pause, with no more words, the warden gave the signal. The executioners, their identities hidden by a curtain, began the injection sequence. Witnesses saw Teresa's feet shift slightly beneath the straps. A correctional officer leaned in gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, murmuring quiet words as she slipped away. Within 6 minutes, she was still. At 9:13 p.m. Eastern Time, Teresa Lewis was pronounced dead. The official cause? Execution by lethal injection. Teresa became the first woman executed in Virginia since 1912, and the 12th woman executed in the United States since capital punishment was reinstated in 1976. Should mental capacity matter in capital punishment? Tell me what you think below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories. See you in the next one.